welcome back to the Unbiased Opinion, where everyone's opinion is biased, except ours. I am Colin.
That's a lot of fish. There's always a bigger fish.
So this is the Unbiased Opinion, where everyone's opinion is biased, except ours. So in the breaking news this week of the new Godzilla movie getting a title, which is called Godzilla X Kong: The Rise of the New Empire, we thought it'd be fun to talk about the first attempt at a Godzilla movie, or the first American attempt at a Godzilla movie. And I don't know if you guys know too much about the background of trying to get this movie made, but it pretty much took 6 years to get it made. And what were you gonna say?
Well, I was gonna say I read up on the background. Like there was a completely different vision for it.
I'll explain that in a little bit. I'm assuming Craig doesn't know that.
I know some because I remember I saw a video a few years ago, but refresh my memory.
I wrote down some creepy notes.
Oh.
During work because I was bored because I knew we were going to talk about this. So pretty much, back in 1992, TriStar bought the Godzilla license, and then they hired John DeBont, who did Speed and Twister, to direct the movie in 1994. And the script that he was going to do was written by Ted Elliott and Terry Rossio, who wrote Shrek, Pirates of the Caribbean. And unfortunately for Terry Rossio, he also co-wrote Godzilla vs. Kong, and he has a screenwriting credit in the new Godzilla movie coming out next year.
Oh no.
What a fall from grace he's had. But Sony estimated that Rossio and Elliott's script would cost about 140 to 180 million. And even after they revised some of the script and whatnot, they thought it would cost 120 million. And then DeBont told them, hey, I could do it for a budget of 100 million. But Sony didn't approve of it, and DeBont walked. So then TriStar was panicking. They were like, oh, who are we going to get? Who are we going to get? And then in 1996, they called Roland Emmerich and Dean Devlin, who at first declined the opportunity to direct it. And then they actually eventually accepted it, but only on the condition that they could do whatever they want with it. And that is how we got to where this movie is. And in the original 1994 version, Godzilla did fight a monster called the Griffin, and I wrote this down, it was an alien that took the DNA of a cougar, cow, and bat, and the DNA could like merge or something like that, and it had the body of a mountain lion, the wings of a bat, and the tongue made up of snake heads. And the whole script is online.
Yeah, I was gonna say they released like a graphic novel.
It ends with Godzilla ripping apart the Griffin's body, and he ends up putting the decapitated head of the monster on the Brooklyn Bridge like he's putting a head on a pike. But controversially, this Godzilla did not have a nuclear origin. Instead, he was like created by a bunch of Atlanteans, kind of like Gamera.
Yeah.
And that kind of erases the whole metaphor of Godzilla as a nuclear threat, and it sets the story away from Japan. But ironically enough, Sony did not want to approve of the $100 million for DeBont, but they forked over almost $150 million to Roland Emmerich and Dean Devlin.
And I did see they were talking about the original script for the 94 one, and they had a problem because it was like too destructive and like too much, like they had like a problem with like it being too focused on like the monsters.
Well,
like they were saying like it was way too destructive.
Godzilla was almost in every scene, which is a huge problem because he's entirely CGI, and that's too expensive. And this is 1994 we're talking about.
Yeah. Well, no, that too. But they also said about the script, it was like too much focused on like the destruction and stuff. I guess it was not as.
I didn't read it. But funny enough,
Zack Snyder working on it.
Toho gave Dean Devlin and Roland Emmerich a 75-page dossier about the rules of Godzilla and what to do and what not to do. And some of those rules are dumb, like Godzilla can't have 5 fingers; he can only have 4. He has to have like 3 rows of spines or like dorsal plates. And then they said Godzilla cannot eat people and Godzilla cannot die from conventional weaponry.
Oh
And they
man.
pretty much ignored everything, Dean Devlin and Roland Emmerich. So this is how we got the 1998 one, which was it was met with universal disdain and was a moderate box office success.
Colin,
Oh,
just to quote exactly what it says. It said McPherson felt that the script's depiction of Godzilla was relentless, quote unquote, noting very much a Godzilla POV.
I don't care about
So you
that.
neither. No. But here,
Devin fact check doesn't like it.
But it said so you neither identify with Godzilla nor with the scientists trying to protect the world. He also took issue that the first half of the script was driven by destruction, and by the script's midpoint there was a quote unquote monster fatigue.
Probably. I mean, I never read it, so I might.
That was Elliot and Rossio's script. No,
Yeah.
that was just that was part of also the issue that they had with their version of Godzilla.
Well, the main
script.
issue was just too expensive.
Yeah, and also
So,
too, did you ever see the original design for the
yeah, I
'94
did.
one?
I did.
He looked much more like
Well, it looked
actual
faithful.
Godzilla.
So enough
Yeah,
about the unmade '94 one. Let's talk about the one that did get made, unfortunately. And I, for one, don't hate it.
It's funny because
I
I don't
agree.
hate it either. I mean,
I,
I know it's a horrible adaptation, but I don't.
I just
hate it.
if it literally was not coined Godzilla, this would be there really wouldn't be like an issue with the monster movie that it is.
So I guess you could say I have a soft spot for this movie because this, when we were growing up, this was one of the newer Godzilla movies that came out on
I think it was the first
VHS.
one we all saw, right?
Well, I saw Godzilla 2000, but I remember I ruined my VHS copy because, or at least no, I didn't ruin it, but I besmirched the cover art because I tried adding an iris on Godzilla's eye, and it was done in pen and it looks terrible. Like this movie and the Heisei era of Godzilla were the newer movies we had growing up,
Yeah,
and we didn't know anything about the Millennium series besides Godzilla 2000 until like 2005 when they all came out in DVD.
yeah,
So, like all the ones we had on VHS was all we had back then, and who knew? Like I know in the early 2000s, like there are so many rumors about what Godzilla movies were going on because anyone could make anything up on the internet back then, and
So, it's so much newer
you wouldn't
too.
know if it was true or not. You could literally make up the wildest things, and no one would be like, "Oh, that's not true." You just didn't know. That's
yeah,
how it was back then, and I
yeah,
think I always knew as a kid that this one was didn't feel like a Godzilla movie, but was still fun enough to watch.
yeah.
Definitely
No, yeah.
entertaining.
No, like I said, I enjoyed it. I just don't look at it like a Godzilla movie. I look at it like a monster movie, and I enjoy it because if if you take away that side of it, his design like if it's just a separate monster, like it was a cool design. The setting everything was interesting. Um, the action scenes were entertaining. Um, I did enjoy it.
So I'm gonna say some of my positives. So I wrote down like a whole bunch of bullet notes. As I said, I think the movie's pretty well paced. It is 138 minutes long, and it doesn't really feel that long. It's the longest Godzilla movie of
Really?
of all the movies. It's the longest. I think it's much better paced than the 2014 Godzilla movie, and easily much better paced than Godzilla vs Kong. I also thought the VFX holds up pretty well, and I
Mhm.
know a lot of people had issues with it, but I think they compare it to Jurassic Park, and I think that's a little disingenuous. So I looked this up. Jurassic Park. Do you know how many VFX shots Jurassic Park had in
No.
the whole movie?
Maybe it has to be under 10, probably, right?
No, because it's
Just
probably what,
say
like 100?
it had 63 VFX shots,
Oh
and
Jesus, I was way off.
they had 15 minutes of total dinosaur time, but only 4 to 5 minutes were CGI. For this movie, there were 400 VFX shots and about 185 to 235 Godzilla shots were entirely CGI. almost that much. Only 24 were practical Godzilla shots, and Godzilla has 13 minutes of screen time. So it's definitely, they had more to do with the VFX. And also, they also shot in New York City. It was a very expensive movie, so I think it's easy to compare that to Jurassic Park.
But I think you can see the influence from Jurassic Park.
Oh no, we'll get to that.
Yeah. And that's where I think people, to say it is like exactly like Jurassic Park, that's not fair. But you could definitely.
Well, I was just talking about comparing the VFX. I didn't.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh no, the VFX was, especially for its time, does very much hold up pretty well, especially considering
with the miniature sets too, like the real explosions. Like I kind of like these late '90s movies where they actually have real sets, real miniatures, and they blow things up, and it looks so cool. It's now like Marvel, where every actor is just behind a green screen or blue screen.
Yeah, because they don't reshoot every edit it to rechange the
but
story.
These they're blowing up buildings. They had a actual Chrysler Building head that they just dropped in front of a green screen that they reintegrated.
Yeah,
it's so great, and it makes you appreciate the craftsmanship of movies back then. Now everyone got lazy and everything's digital. I don't want to sound like one of those old contrarians, but I think it's definitely a lot more special when they do it.
Back in my day. Yeah. Old man Colin.
Get off my lawn.
I wrote down too. I thought Godzilla was very well integrated with his screen time, and they spaced him out. His first appearance is 25 minutes in the movie, and he's teased 5 minutes in. And compared to the 2014 one, where he's teased in the very beginning, and then he doesn't stroll in for another hour, they make good use of his screen time.
Yeah.
And also... you go.
No, keep going.
My last positive is the soundtrack by David Arnold. I thought it was pretty good. It was loud and bombastic, but I liked it.
Yeah,
that's my last positive.
One of my main positives, rewatching this, I thought they did a great job, even though especially considering he was not nearly the size of Toho's Godzilla. Where it's easier to do the scaling shots, especially most of them, it's the wide shot of the city, where in this movie, it was cool how they did it, where they made him smaller, so he has to actually maneuver around the neighborhoods of New York. And I still thought that for as much smaller as he was than the other Godzillas, I still think they did a really good job doing the perspective shots, the scaling shots of him when he's moving throughout the city and the people, getting the people's point of view, especially when he first enters the city. I did the with that old fisherman, and he's coming in.
Guy.
Yeah, how that guy didn't get tossed like a fish, still beyond me. But and then the shot of him jumping over the highway, and him moving throughout the city, and you see, they did a cool job of everyone panicking, and then the scene when he picks up that truck and that poor guy's hanging off the side of it and he's just shaking.
I like how he has his headphones on, then just gets picked up randomly, falls out the door.
Yeah, but they did a very good job of scaling him for. He's still big, but they did a good job integrating him and scaling him within the confines of the city. So I thought they did a really good job of utilizing that with him, especially I did the fisher boat scene. He's not seen, but that's obviously a set, but they do a good job with that. And everything. So I did like the soundtrack too. I thought the action scenes with him in the military were very well done. And that was my main positives.
What about you, Craig? What say you for positives?
Well, obviously all the stuff you guys said, but also the military. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think you guys kind of said everything.
All right, so I'm going to move into my...
I was going to say also, too, yes. For another positive, some of the characters, reactions to, especially, Hank Azaria, I thought he was pretty funny in this. And like some of the lines from like what was it, the mayor, when he was like yelling at the military guy.
Yeah.
He's like, "What's wrong with you? You do more damage than that damn thing."
Now we're gonna get into my mixed opinion, and it's one bullet point. I counted this too. I rewatched it and I went like almost scene by scene. Too many locations and plot traveling. And this is especially apparent in the first 22 minutes of the movie, where I wrote down starts in the French Polynesia in the opening credits, then it cuts to the South Pacific Ocean where those Japanese people get attacked. Then it cuts to Chernobyl with Matthew Broderick and his terrible acting. Then it cuts to Tahiti where the French people and they use the cigarette lighter. He's like, "What did you see, old man?" Then it cuts to Panama, then to New York City, then to Jamaica, then to the eastern seaboard, and that's when the ships get pulled under, and then to New York City again. That is way too much going on in your first 22 minutes. Way too much going on. Too much traveling. So now my negatives. Script is terrible. I wrote down too many characters, terrible romance plot. I think they really should have just followed Jean Reno and his French friends trying to stop Godzilla, because his motive makes sense. Let's talk about the terrible romance plot. Audrey is terrible. Not her acting and whatnot, because I know this movie killed the actress's career. But she is a terrible person. She lies to Nick after she ghosted him for a bunch of years. She takes his top secret tape to pursue her own, or to further her own fake career as a journalist, or not journalist, as a news reporter, and then the army sees that and it screws over Nick because the army dismisses Nick's theory about the baby Godzillas in the nest. And that almost screws over everybody. So Audrey is terrible. She is a terrible human being.
I just say journalists, so journalist characters.
I meant reporter, whatever. But she is absolutely terrible. And the fact that Nick takes her back at the end is mind blowing. It is why? Is he desperate?
Obviously he's desperate. I mean,
yeah, sure. He's Matthew Broderick. He killed somebody. So,
I was gonna say the end scene is just them driving and he winks at the camera.
So we'll talk about Godzilla not really being Godzilla. Let's see. Oh, I wrote this down. Poor attempts at humor. And I wrote humor in quotations. There's the infamous "That's a lot of fish." And the movie pauses after that because the Sergeant O'Neill just looks at Matthew Broderick like, yeah, I guess.
Well, do you wonder if that's also to pause, like sitcoms to tell people to pause so the audience can laugh?
But it's just awkward because he doesn't even say anything. He just looks at him like, "That's a lot of fish." Like, yes, that's a factually true statement.
That's the plan.
And the part that did get a chuckle out of me was at the end when this is after they fed him and everyone is destroyed. There's a bunch of destruction everywhere. The fish are gone, and then O'Neill says, "Man, we didn't even hurt him," or we didn't do anything to him. And then Matthew Broderick says, "Well, we did feed him." People are killed. That made me chuckle.
Another bad scene of dialogue was when Godzilla's running through the city and those two guys are looting that store.
Oh yeah.
One guy's like,
I get that feeling that something bad's gonna happen.
Yeah, I just got one of those feelings, man.
Like so cliched.
Yeah, I wonder too with that's a lot of fish. I wonder if the script said he's supposed to think it, show it on his face, but Matthew Broderick misread it and just said it, and that's how the guy just looks at him confused.
Yeah, that's a lot of fish. What do you want? What?
Yeah, we're fighting a radioactive lizard. What do you expect?
One thing that isn't really funny, and they did this all the time, was anytime a new character would meet Nick, they would say Nico Topopopoulos. They'd always mispronounce his name for whatever reason. And it would have been maybe funny the first time, but they do it to him every time.
I wonder if that's like Roland Emmerich couldn't get the guy's name right. Who like they
Well,
named
he's
him
named
after.
after the guy who designed the Godzilla for this movie.
I wonder if that's like a joke. Like no one could say that guy's the real life guy's name right.
Dr. Nico Tatopoulos, I think they called him at one point.
Tadpole.
Just trying to
Yeah,
see.
they should have just cut out like his character and Audrey.
Yeah, Audrey was absolutely terrible. Hold on. Trying to look at the script right now and see what the screen direction is for That's a Lot of Fish.
Oh my god.
Okay, so here what it says. Exterior, Flatiron Square, fish pile, same night. A mountain of fish have been piled into the center of the Flatiron Square. Nick. That's a lot of fish. A master of the obvious. Sergeant O'Neill shoots him a glare and moves over to the men. Together they march into the building at the edge of the square. Oh, that's it. So stupid. Okay, let's see what else I wrote. Oh, yes. Military is utterly incompetent in this movie.
Yeah, especially the helicopters. I was like, were stormtroopers piloting them?
Oh, and they made a line that is so dumb where they said the heat-seeking missiles can't lock on him because he's colder than the buildings around him. So they're implying that Godzilla is cold-blooded, and they think cold-blooded literally means your blood is cold. No, it just means you can't regulate your body temperature. That's why lizards have basking lamps. Just like something so stupid, like a child would think of that.
Yeah. Especially when the one shot when they blew up the Chrysler building, the top of it. The best was like Godzilla didn't like
Just
even
ducked.
like yeah, he literally looked at them and just ducked his head and moved. Like it wasn't even like he jumped or anything. He just looked and ducked.
Yeah, and then they used a pregnancy test on Godzilla, which definitely wouldn't work at all on the lizard, no less.
Also, like, how did they keep losing him?
Yeah, that made. I mean, obviously for the plot, they have to lose him, but it makes no sense how you could lose him because New York isn't as dense as this movie thinks it is.
You know, it's like it goes
Like
like
the
a forest of
helicopter chase
buildings.
scenes, I'm like, where in New York is that? Like, he's just running around these buildings that are taller than him. Like maybe a couple, but not like a whole bunch of blocks.
Yeah.
Because like he went underground or whatever. Like, okay, like the seismic activity, you can't find him through that. Like, every step he's gonna take, you're gonna be like easy to be able to find him.
Oh, I
And,
also
and,
wrote.
and
Yeah, Daniel, you go.
I was gonna say, and like the body of water surrounding them, it's a bay. You really can't find them.
Well, I
Not
wrote
even
in
a
my
bay, like
notes
it's two
too.
rivers.
How
Yeah.
deep is the Hudson River? Because Godzilla in the second helicopter attack jumps over a bunch of ships, and what made me chuckle too is when he went in the water like head first. It was like a tiny splash, but his whole body's submerged entirely. I'm like, how deep is the Hudson River?
All right, let's see. I'm gonna stat that.
It was the Hudson or was it the East River?
I
But
think it
none
was
of
the
it
Hudson.
matters.
It was the Hudson River,
It's the Hudson.
and they had a bunch of.
All right. The
submarines
deepest
in
part of
there.
it. The deepest part of it is 203 feet.
Yeah. In the movie, the Hudson River is big enough to have two submarines like flying around. So my other notes, let's see.
It would have been funny if they went to chase him and the submarines got grounded.
One part that did, yeah, right. One part that did make me laugh is that they shoot the torpedoes at Godzilla, and he just ducks under that one submarine, skims it, and those two torpedoes just blow up a submarine. Yeah, that stuff like just makes me chuckle. Like I'm sure that'd probably anger a bunch of people.
I mean, it's schlock. It's still that is part of Godzilla movies.
So I don't know if you guys knew this, but Mayor Ebert and the actor who did play Mayor Ebert did pass away. I think earlier this week. He is named after the famous critic Roger Ebert, and his aide is something Siskel, and he's named after the critic that would go on a daily show with Roger Ebert called Gene Siskel. They're critics who panned Roland Emmerich's movies. They panned Stargate and Independence Day. So Dean Devlin and Roland Emmerich really went through the legal process and trouble of having their names in a movie. And in case anyone's thinking or anyone's wondering, you just can't put people's names willy-nilly. You have to get it cleared by a bunch of lawyers. They went through all this trouble to put them in the movie, and they did absolutely nothing. And what's funny is that even Gene Siskel, in his review of this movie, said, if you're going to go through the trouble of putting us in this movie, why don't you take advantage of the situation and have the monster eat or squash us? It's like,
maybe
what
that was like
thinking?
the legal limit. Because if they kill him, maybe they thought they'd get sued. Even though Marvel did that with their Fantastic Four actors, and then I don't think they got sued.
Oh yeah, I think you told me that, right?
Yeah.
Somebody told me that. Yeah, you did. But it's just like, what are they thinking? Like, have them just get like blown up or something. Like, it doesn't have to be graphic. The Marvel one sounds graphic, but
I mean, at least maybe be a little more subtle. Like, maybe don't call him Ebert.
Yeah, he did the thumbs up. He did the thumbs up, which is what Ebert would do. And then they made Siskel like some yes man.
Yeah, it was like his campaign manager or something.
Yeah. He's like, here, have some candy. No, I don't want any candy. Leave me alone. And do you guys have any negatives too?
Well, besides like the obvious stuff.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to touch on the military, but you hit that. Especially not just the helicopters, but also like when they try to lay the second fish trap and Godzilla sniffs it out, and he starts booking it. And like, and the best is they have the whole army. They're shooting grenades around. It's like everything is just going to the right or left of him.
It's like they're going out of their way to hit every building.
Well, that was the best part too. Is like, you know, when Godzilla first comes in, they're like, "Do not fire at him until he's in the park. We don't want to hit any buildings." And then the guy just says, "You know, screw it, start firing." And they hit like every building. They should do like a casualty, like an unofficial casualty list that the military had in that movie.
Yeah,
they also cleared out the city. Imagine trying to evacuate Manhattan. I mean, it's easier now because no one's there, but trying to do that back in the day.
Yeah, really. And this movie has a very dated 9/11 or Twin Towers reference, saying that Godzilla's attack was the worst thing since the World Trade Center bombings. Oof.
Like that, the Curb Your Enthusiasm theme.
Yeah, right. Another thing too that's very bizarre is that this is like kind of a mini Simpsons reunion cast. They have Hank Azaria.
I was going to point that out, yeah.
Yeah, Nancy Cartwright for a little bit, and Harry Shearer. Right, I think I'm butchering his last name.
I think it's Shearer.
Yeah, he's the guy that was the Mr. Kamen, the news anchor.
He does Mr. Burns.
Yeah,
Smithers.
Hank Azaria is like 100 million characters in that show, and Nancy Cartwright's Bart.
Formerly Apu, rip in peace.
Isn't Nancy Cartwright Bart?
Yeah.
I think she's that kid that goes like ha ha or ha ha. That kid, whatever.
Oh, Nelson?
Yeah, I'm not a Simpsons fan. I don't know.
I watch a lot of cartoons. I know.
Very bizarre that they have all those people. And I think, to touch upon what Daniel said, I did like Hank Azaria in the film too.
Yeah.
At one point,
especially Animal.
Yeah. Oh, this movie also makes a very 90s word that is his wife, Hank Azaria's wife, says a word. Let's call it regal. That you can't say anymore.
It was a different time.
And it's like, yep, that's from the 90s.
Times you could show the Twin Towers.
One part that did make me chuckle was when Gene Rio, Mr. French, as Hank Azaria calls him, he's like, "Oh, what do we do, Mr. French? Reading would be a good idea." Sorry.
Yeah. Because another bad piece of dialogue was when they were in Madison Square Garden, and Jean Reno was like, "All right, time to get out of here." Like, shoots the window and throws the rope down, and the one guy looks at Matthew Broderick, goes, "Where did you get this guy?" He goes, "France." Like, what?
Oh, really?
Or like Hank Azaria, like obviously the famous scene is when Godzilla almost steps on him and his reaction to it.
Yeah, that is, I don't know what that is. He's like laughing
What?
like a lunatic.
Yeah.
Look at these like reporters and like these cameramen are insane. Like they almost die for like this stupid 10 seconds of footage.
The one part I did chuckle at too was when they were running in Madison Square Garden, and Matthew Broderick for some reason can't keep up with the group for whatever reason, and Jean Reno and Hank Azaria. What'd
you say?
He's thinking about his driving skills.
Mm.
He can't run fast anymore. But
he's running on the wrong side of the
But they were running Hank Azaria and Jean Reno, they were up ahead, and your favorite female character, she was like waving him on. She's like, this way, and then Hank Azaria just sprints back and goes, not that way, not that way. You just see like the horde of like little Godzillas running after him.
I guess let's talk about the negative, or another negative is that the blatant Jurassic Park ripoff of the Raptors and the baby Godzillas. Yeah. And another thing that this movie also copied Jurassic Park is some of the obnoxious acting.
I was also going to say, too, some of the score, you can hear a bit of Jurassic Park in it.
I wouldn't go that far. It just felt very seamless with the...
There's little drops of it where it's very similar, like, especially when Godzilla's
walking rip off John Williams?
David Arnold?
What?
No, like, that was John Williams, right, who did Jurassic Park. Wouldn't you try to rip him off?
I mean...
But... Not for a quote-unquote Godzilla movie. But I mean, with some of the score, like, especially, like, I feel like when, like, the people were kind of, like when Godzilla was moving and they were, like, kind of admiring him or, like, in awe of him, there were, like, a little bit of hints of it.
I wouldn't say that. Anyway, let's go to the Raptors and how I think in terms of CGI, the baby Godzillas look pretty bad. There are some scenes that they look like they're not shaded right. And granted, the VFX team that probably took this, they're like, we have to add how many baby Godzillas in the show?
Yeah, there was way too many of them. You didn't need that many.
Like, I know they want to have that threat, like, oh, if we don't do this now, then all these babies are going to hatch and they're all going to run around and then they could reproduce. I get that. But just, like, too many.
Well, especially that, and to touch on your point of the bad, VFX, especially that shot when they run down, like they run to the stairs, and you see all of them laid out, and it's like, like there it really did not look good at all.
I also find it funny that the nest is in Madison Square Garden, of all places.
Yeah.
Like, you couldn't find it. Obviously, it could be some obscure building.
Yeah. Could be on the Statue of Liberty.
Twin Towers.
Oof. Not in the basement, I'll tell you that. So anyway, with the baby raptors, with the baby Godzillas, I just don't know why they would want to do that. Like, I'm obviously to capitalize off Jurassic Park. But still, it's just like, I don't know, it felt very bizarre, especially in the Godzilla movie too. It felt very bizarre.
And also too, like, they kind of like, the scene didn't play out, like, it was kind of like a weird tone because it was like, they're kind of like throwing in some humor in there too, like when they're getting chased.
Oh, and then people are just getting killed.
Yeah, and then like Matthew Broderick, like as he's, jogging, behind the group, he like, I thought it was, like, it's stupid that they threw this in here because, like, he would have been caught instantly. But, he's already trailing the group, so he takes it even more time to throw down the basketballs and then the gumball machine. And then he stops to watch the Raptors, trip over the gumballs. Like, he watches them for 5 seconds and then keeps running.
Like a little cartoon.
Yeah, like that. I was like...
I think the one part that was kind of funny is when he's in the elevator. And then when it opens up, it just shows a bunch of baby Godzillas destroying and eating like popcorn, and he just like slightly chuckles and closes the door.
Yeah, I guess like that scene, like it just the tone of it was a little too mixed
Yeah,
because it's
because
like
you have the French
this is
people
the
getting
biggest.
eaten alive.
Yeah, and this is the biggest threat because there's like hundreds of them, and like we can't have these things getting out, and it's like, yeah, we're gonna take our time, throwing in some jokes, and
So the movie ends probably with the biggest slap in face in any kind of movie. Godzilla dies by missiles. He gets entangled in the Brooklyn Bridge. And apparently somebody mapped it out. Whenever they asked which bridge was closer, the Brooklyn Bridge was not closer to where they were. That doesn't matter. That doesn't bother me. Godzilla gets entangled in the Brooklyn Bridge and he just gets killed. And that is very, very frustrating for obvious reasons. But that it also goes hand in hand with the idea that Roland Emmerich and Dean Devlin don't understand Godzilla. And what's very weird is when I was reading some of the interviews and whatnot, they are the exact opposite of J.J. Abrams to the extreme. J.J. Abrams is hyper focused on nostalgia. They said they wanted nothing to do with the original Godzilla and the nostalgia with it. They wanted to do something entirely new, which on paper sounds like a good idea. You know, they want to distance themselves from the Japanese and try to do their own thing. The problem is they went unchecked. No one stopped them. They had too much power. So they did whatever they wanted to, and that's how we got this mess.
But it's like if you're gonna do that, like why adapt Godzilla? You know?
yeah,
Oh, because
and
it's
why even
Italian.
and why even having that like then honestly they should have just given him taking out the end of the roar. They should that roar should not have even sounded anything like him at all.
Well, they knew they had TriStar and Toho. You know, they had them where they wanted them because for Toho it was too much for them to lose to say no. So that's why they approved of the design because apparently like when they showed the design to Toho, the new one, there was just silence for a little bit. Like they were shocked, and then they told them to come back tomorrow.
Oh man.
Half the staff wasn't there the next day.
But
Yeah,
yeah, they don't understand Godzilla, and I guess what's really
They didn't care.
yeah, they not only did they care, they didn't understand. And what's such a shame is that Roland Emmerich, especially, never cared about Godzilla. He constantly said in interviews that the design never made sense to him, like the Japanese one, and then he bashed a lot of the old Godzilla movies. And you know that's fair, you can, but he didn't understand why
But
most
it's
of
like,
the
why would you
silhouette.
bash it if you're making a movie about it?
Well,
It's not
not
like you're
even
okay.
that,
You're
not even that
bashing it.
though. But he bashed him because he didn't understand that the movies don't look cheap on purpose. They're they didn't have a lot of money and they're made with tight schedules with tight budgets.
Also made decades ago before
Well, yeah,
CGI and
and like
stuff.
for example, Godzilla vs Megalon was filmed in 3 weeks. Godzilla vs Hedorah was filmed in less than a month with one crew, no second unit, no nothing like that. One crew filmed the whole movie in a month,
yeah.
which is insane. So
I
it's just
never
like
understood the design. You imagine some guy running around in a prosthetic of that Godzilla?
they
Good
did. They
luck.
actually did have some like shots they were going to use more. They try to use more practical stuff, but then it was easier to do CGI. And
No, no,
apparently,
no, no. No, I'm saying is he's bashing the old Godzilla design, but I'm like it also has to accommodate an actor in it. You can't have a guy hunched over like a velociraptor in those that 100-pound suit. He'll drown, literally drown in his own sweat.
so also they never intended on Godzilla having the atomic breath at all, and that's pretty obvious. But
Yeah,
that was leaked, I believe, that there was no atomic breath, so they added the power breath very last second, which was Godzilla breathing flammable gas onto things that could ignite them. They did that because they thought that would please the fans because they thought the atomic breath wasn't realistic. Well, it's like, well, none of it's realistic. Like, why are they so hung
it's hard.
up about that?
I was like, yours is an iguana that gets mutated by a nuclear blast.
Yeah,
What's the like people like focus on this realism? Like I understand to a certain extent, but like at
you
some
don't want
point it's
Godzilla
just
vs
a
Kong.
movie.
You don't want that. That I think nukes the fridge, as Indiana Jones fans like to say. It's just ridiculous. It's that movie, but it's like you have to. It's like, what are you expecting? Like it's not going to be super realistic. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's being stupid.
It's a low IQ thinking.
Kenpachiro Satsuma, who played Godzilla in the Heisei era, actually walked out of a screening of this movie when he saw it in Japan.
Good for him.
Trying to think of my other notes I wrote.
That's dedication and conviction.
Yeah, so this movie was it should have grossed more because all the people at TriStar thought it was going to be like a global success, and then they actually did not test screen this movie.
Wow.
So obviously, because they had such a tight schedule to work with, they had to make the Memorial Day weekend of 1998. They had to make that deadline, and they apparently just barely made it. So good for them that the movie looks like this, and they made it by their deadline. Good for them.
I mean, I don't know.
They couldn't test screen though, which was their fatal flaw because they wrote a mess. Like, let's be honest, even if they reshot some things, it'd still be a disaster. But the fact that they didn't get time to test screen, and apparently the TriStar executives saw the movie and they were furious. They're probably thinking like, "Oh man, why didn't we step in? Why did we just let these guys do what they wanted to do?" And that's when they decided to invest heavily in the marketing campaign. So like the first 2 weeks or so, it would do really well, and then it would die out. And that didn't really happen because it was below expectations opening weekend, and it ended up grossing $379 million off of a $150 million budget, which isn't very good.
And that's not taking it. Is that just the production, or is that something taking into account like marketing and stuff and advertising?
What does not include marketing.
Oof.
I just have a quick tangent.
Yes, Craig.
So with test screenings,
Yes.
how I guess they do it most of the time, but like, because back
When
then,
did
like
they
people,
do it? When did they do it? Is what you're wondering?
no, because like like in movies now they test screen and basically have to rewrite huge chunks of the movies. I mean, that wasn't really like a thing until like now, right?
I think in the 80s and 90s they did lots of test screenings because apparently the ending of Independence Day was reshot because of feedback from test screenings. I think nowadays though movies would be partially completed and then they'd do test screenings. While it seemed like back then they'd be mostly completed and then they would do test screenings.
So like maybe you get like a scene here or there, but like nowadays it's like you could reshoot like half the movie, like
Well,
we've heard in some
that's
cases.
like Marvel, because they shoot
Yeah.
the
Well,
blue
Marvel
screen
like
so
Disney,
they
but
can. Yeah.
Well, it's easy when it's just done in front of a green screen. Like, okay, yeah, guys, just come back for a week in front of this green screen.
yeah, change the background. Like we don't even need you. We'll just digitally insert you.
Yeah, it's true.
I don't know, because like it's weird because like you'd say
Yeah.
someone they didn't test screen it, like it sounds weird now, but like
I guess,
back then.
and I guess also too, like not only the tight budget, but I guess they were kind of banking on like the success of Jurassic Park and like kind of an influence into this movie. Like they
The name
maybe
of
thought
Godzilla.
we did. They thought maybe we didn't need to test
Well,
screen it. Like,
no. What screwed them over? There's two things. One, their hubris, because everyone thought that Roland Emmerich and Dean Devlin were untouchable because of Independence Day, and then their second thing that screwed them over was they did not show Godzilla's design until like a week or so before the movie, or like at the premiere. They hid his design entirely. Even the toy companies couldn't release the toy until the opening weekend. And then there's a quote for someone that says toys sell like 2 months before the movie and 2 months after. That's their lifespan of merchandise for a movie. It's not very long. It's not very big. And this movie was, especially with the negative reception and how Godzilla looked, it did not sell well at all with the toys. Toy companies were left with an overabundance of Godzilla toys that they couldn't sell. So it completely backfired on them on their marketing plan to hide Godzilla.
They probably like hate even talking about this film now.
Oh
Is
yeah,
TriStar's even around?
Yeah, TriStar's still around.
No, but I mean, those two.
Well, they're just a bunch of idiots. But it's just like you look at these massive inept mistakes, and you're like, how are professionals doing this?
Yeah.
That's like I don't
And
feel
it's
bad when I
listen,
can make a mistake.
yeah,
Like these people
and,
get paid millions of dollars and they can't do the basic things.
It was
and
incompetence at its
yeah,
finest the way they handled this.
yeah. And I understand if you want to take Godzilla in a different direction or revamp him a bit, but there's such a loyal fan base to it. Like you have to at least pay the proper amount of respects to the original character. If you're even if you're gonna do something new, you still have to pay enough tribute to Godzilla that it touches enough, home base enough with the fans that they can then accept a new idea for it.
Well, it's like with any adaptation, right? Like how
Yeah,
far do you go where it's like still an adaptation versus just someone
yeah,
basically making something new but slapping the old name on it to try to sell it?
yeah.
Yeah,
It's a fine
incompetence
line
at
to
its
walk that most people can't do.
what, Craig?
I'm saying it's a fine line to walk that most people just simply aren't able to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you know. I don't know if I would want to see a J.J. Abrams one, let's say, because like they're the polar opposite of J.J. Abrams. Like I said, they wanted nothing to do with the original. But what would a J.J. Abrams Godzilla look like? It'd probably be disgusting. Ugh.
Like a shot for shot remake of the first one.
Yeah, that'd be gross.
He would just be fighting a bigger and blacker Godzilla.
Yeah, like this Godzilla's like super charcoal, like burned charcoal skinned.
It's then no, like in the first one, like he doesn't even get killed by
No, no, no,
It
no,
was
no.
like a
destroyer, but
super
like
oxygen destroyer. And
Yeah,
its case
no.
is
the
This
helium
this
destroyer.
yeah.
this oxygen destroyer can destroy 7 Godzillas, and there's only one of them.
Somehow Godzilla returned.
No, Colin. J.J. Abrams would put in Mecha Godzilla, and he would make him big and black and scary.
Yeah.
I'm evil on this chest.
And then
Yeah,
he would have
bad
his
guy.
and then like Colin, he would from the people's point of view, there'd be a zoom flare in on Mecha
Yeah.
Godzilla.
Mechagodzilla's knuckles would have like bone to pick written across them, and he puts them together.
The activation code name for him is Bad Guy.
But it's baffling. You see these professionals just completely ruin an IP. Not really ruin an IP, but they just whiffed on their chance entirely. Like they didn't even hit the T-ball. Like they completely missed. It wasn't even
Well, I'm
done.
glad. Well, Toho definitely rebounded strong, and they saw that. We're like, yeah, we'll take care of this. And then Godzilla 2000 came out and rectified everything.
So what's interesting with the Heisei era, when this was all happening, Godzilla, I think it was Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 2 was supposed to be the last one
Mm-hmm.
because they didn't want to compete. They didn't want to have competing Godzilla movies with the American one because that was supposed to come out in '94 at the time, and then pushed to '96. So that's when Godzilla then went to Godzilla vs. Destroy and ended there. And then they could have had like a couple more years before the '98 one. I don't know. It's just like the American one getting pushed back kind of screwed over Toho a little bit because they could have had more years of the Heisei Godzilla movies.
But still, you ended on a good note.
Oh yeah,
Well, good movie, I should say.
That's
I thought it was sad.
well, but then Godzilla Junior.
because that's why like Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla was so rushed because when they heard the news that like he left, they're like we got to get this movie made because they wanted to keep having interest like public interest of Godzilla. So that's why Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla is a disaster. It is a rushed mess.
Yeah, which is a shame, considering he was one of the. I always loved Space Godzilla. I thought he was one of the cooler villains.
So I know we talked about, well, actually, Daniel and I, we talked about the Godzilla movies back in 2019. And I guess we could briefly mention the American ones, the other ones that followed. So 16 years later, the 2014 Godzilla movie came out.
Wait, Colin, you're forgetting that there's supposed to be a trilogy of these movies.
Oh, yes. Well, yeah.
Yeah.
They thought there was going to be a trilogy. Everyone expected there to be a trilogy, but after this, they quietly let their Godzilla license expire. And I believe they expired in either 2002 or 2003. Because I mean, the movie was originally supposed to be projected to make like 700 million, 800, and it didn't even make 400. Like,
Womp, womp, womp.
Yeah. Yeah, well then they kind of, scrapped something together and they made the animated series and like released like a couple like video games on the Game Boy for it.
yeah, I never actually watched the animated series.
I didn't watch the anime series, but I do remember playing the like the Game Boy, those games. They were fun, but I was also like 5.
So then, as I was saying, in 2010, Legendary bought the Godzilla license, and we got the 2014 one, which is kind of weird how what this movie does so bad, like the 2014 movie does well, what the 2014 movie does like bad, this movie does kind of well. It's kind of weird how they're you
All the
think the
2014 one do
would
is just show Godzilla.
yeah, and not have Aaron Johnson look bored, and maybe not have Gareth Edwards. But at least
Hey,
like
he did a
that's
really
how
good job on Rogue One.
No, he didn't. That's how you do an adaptation right. It's they got the general impression of Godzilla, what he looks like, what he sounds like. It's very simple things that you do, and then Roland Emmerich couldn't do that.
Yeah.
It's baffling.
I am shocked. Not
Yes.
really.
I think they had to take the approach of like Michael Dougherty, because he took a very honored approach with King of the Monsters.
Oh yeah, that was just
it's probably still it's the best MonsterVerse movie. It's the best
by far.
American Godzilla movie.
Yeah, because it actually was. It felt like a love letter to Godzilla.
Unpopular opinion, I think Godzilla vs Kong is the worst American Godzilla movie.
I
prefer the '98 one over Godzilla vs Kong.
I mean, the only thing that saves the Godzilla vs Kong for me is Godzilla just wrecking Kong.
Yes, but believe it or not, this Godzilla vs Kong has a dumber script than this. Somehow.
I'm not saying I'm defending. I'm just saying, like,
that's Robo Godzilla.
No, that's Mecha Godzilla.
He gets his name from a kid who went to computer camp for a week.
Yeah, he doesn't know what HTML means. Like, who wrote that? Like, what?
I think I could hack it. It just tries to enter in password. This is like a highly militarized operation.
Yeah.
Oof.
They treat it like it's a QuickTime event in a video game. You have to press buttons.
Never mind the sketchy conspiracy theory guy just hanging out with a bunch of kids. Well, disregard that, but...
And Bullet Train, he's obsessed with the children's TV show. Like, is this like a theme with this guy?
Oh, God. Imagine for Godzilla and Kong, New Empire. But
segue into that.
Yeah. Well, I actually...
talk about that now, or should we save that for another time?
We can talk about it. But I did want to say one more thing. I did want to say one more thing about the 2014 one. Originally, I was very disappointed with it, and just all they had to do was just show more Godzilla. But it actually, with after Godzilla vs Kong, it has aged much better for me. I can appreciate how they approached it versus what Godzilla vs Kong and 2 Hour Adam Wingard did.
Under 2 hours.
I will say that about the 2014 one. It has aged better for me now.
I always liked it. I mean, I never really disliked it.
No, it's not a bad movie. It's just disappointing because they just don't show Godzilla really at all. And then when you do see him, it's in the darkest setting possible.
Yeah,
which reminds me another thing too. I guess a lot of people hate on the '98 one because of the constant rain, and for me personally, I don't mind. I never minded the rain. I mean, when I was rewatching, I was thinking just for like the actors and all the crew members, like they have to wear wetsuits the whole time.
I was gonna make a comment on that. I was like, did they film this in Seattle?
So that's one of those things I feel like people, with a little.
I didn't mind it. I was just joking.
Special, like they hung up on.
Yeah, you can see everything. Nothing is really obscured or murky from the rain. It's a choice, obviously. And Roland Emmerich can deny why they did the rains. Like he said, it's harder to have CGI in the rain or whatever. They did it to hide some of the flaws, and even like Pacific Rim, which everyone praises, and rightfully so, that movie was in like a downpour. So much rain in that movie too.
Yeah.
Well, it's
Well,
like,
even
I don't see what the big deal is. Like, people get hung up on that kind of like those details. I'm like, well, what's the issue? Like, other movies do it. I mean, so
it was. I mean, King of the Monsters did it too. You had in the Antarctic and in the final battle in Boston.
I don't know. It's cool.
I
Like,
think, like,
Yeah,
it's
you
the
have the
same.
lightning going and stuff. It
Not
adds
even
to
that.
the. It adds to it.
It's the same reason why whenever there's a scene at night in movies, and then they're like outside by a street, and the street is always wet, and that's so it can bounce off lights and like make it pop more. That's probably why, like, let's say King of the Monsters did that with rain, where lights can reflect off of wet material. I don't know. I guess it's to make it look like make it pop more.
I mean, I've
That's
always
my
heard
only
like
guess.
CGI is better
At
in
least for
rain.
like a 2019 movie.
Yeah, that's what I was under the impression too, Craig. It was like it was easier. It was like
I can't. I have no proof. It's just what I've read online, and what I've read online is always true.
Well, I'm just saying, like, for movies now, like, obviously back then in the 90s, like, they did that to hide some of the flaws. Jurassic Park did that. They did that with the T-Rex breakout scene.
Yeah.
With the paddock.
Yeah.
But also, at least with Jurassic Park, that worked into the story too. He broke out because the hurricane took out.
Yeah.
We're getting off topic.
Look at Godzilla 2014. There was no rain, and you couldn't see him.
The only time you could see him was when he's attacking San Francisco during the day. Otherwise,
you could you saw him because he was using his atomic breath.
Yeah, but to summarize, the constant rain never bothered me as much as it apparently bothers everybody else.
I think they need to get their heads checked, but that's just me.
I want to see the sunshine. I want to feel happy while these monsters are leveling cities.
Yeah, okay, pal. So let's talk about what Toho did to this Godzilla. In Godzilla Final Wars in 2004, they decided to bring back the American Godzilla movie. And they did that by actually taking one of the toys from the 1998 line and then scanning it so they could have a CGI model based off the toy. And then the fight scene between Godzilla and Zilla, as he's now called, it's like 30 seconds long. They fight in Sydney, Australia. Godzilla intercepts Zilla as he jumps in the air and he lands into the Sydney Opera House and he just blows him up.
I always laughed at that because I always thought that was just like their way of
oh, it's a big middle finger.
Oh yeah, like yeah, screw you. You're not real.
It's always just funny too, like how like they're not even like trying to hide like the fact they just hate him, like they just kill him in those brutal way.
Yeah, it's pretty fun to see that. Again, I don't hate the 98 one, but just like Toho didn't care. They weren't pulling back any punches. In 2001, Godzilla GMK, as it's called, but it's Godzilla Mothra King Ghidorah Giant Monsters All Out Attack. There's a line in the beginning of the movie where there's a bunch of Japanese people in a room, and they're reporting on monster activity or whatever. And then one guy says to the other guy next to him, like, "Oh, that New York attack a couple years ago, the Americans think that's Godzilla, but our guys here have their doubts." Like, they just don't care. They're not holding back.
I mean, it's their property, and they have the right to be angry.
Yeah.
But this always made me chuckle. Good for Toho.
But
it's not good for Toho.
Well, I mean, them making fun of.
I was saying what's not good is the recent announcement.
Oh, should we talk? I guess should we talk about it then?
Yeah.
Instead of saving it for another episode.
Yeah.
Oh wait, we don't have to talk about the MonsterVerse because Godzilla Day was a couple months ago, and then they announced a new Japanese Godzilla movie to come out later this year in November. And apparently it's going to take place post-World War II Japan. And I think some of the rumors...
Would it take place before World War II?
Like immediately after.
Oh, I know. I'm just making a bad joke.
Shut up, Greg. But some of the rumors are that there might be two Godzillas in the movie. Don't know if that's true, obviously, or not. There's been no promotional material so far at all. But yeah, a new Japanese Godzilla movie coming out later this year. It's definitely going to remove that sour taste that the anime trilogy had. Craig, you didn't watch those, I know, but they were pretty bad. The Japanese
The
anime
anime.
trilogy movies.
Oh, the Planet of Monster series.
Yes, those are pretty bad.
It's it's a different. It's a different take.
It's a
on
different take
Godzilla.
that's done badly.
Yeah, because they made Craig. I don't know if you care for it,
You told
but
me.
yeah.
And I
That
know
kind of time what people want to hear. They want to hear about the new MonsterVerse announcement.
Okay, yeah, the new MonsterVerse announcement with Adam Wingard coming back, and let me pull up my notes because I have thought about this. So the new movie is called.
You have notes on Adam Wingard.
Okay, so I have two things to say actually. First things first. About a year ago, they talked about how there's going to be a new Apple TV series called Godzilla and the Titans. Is the official name. Godzilla's probably not going to be in the.
Who's
the
Apple
TV show.
TV?
Nobody. Godzilla's probably not going to be in the show at all. No one cares about that. But the big news is Godzilla X Kong, the New Empire. And I looked at who wrote this movie. And besides Terry Rossio, who has a respectable background, is a respectable screenwriting career, one of the guys is named Jeremy Slater. And I'm going to read you guys his film credits.
Oh, God.
The Lazarus Effect. Fantastic Four from 2015.
Oh, man.
Death Note.
Oh, no.
And that's it. But apparently he's also writing an untitled Mortal Kombat sequel. Oh no, indeed. So this guy's a bum. Like this is not good. And Simon Barrett, who always works with Adam Wingard usually, and he wrote Blair Witch from 2016. He wrote The Guest, which I think got good reviews. So he's very so-so. But Jeremy Slater, man, like Fantastic Four from 2015. You bring that guy? Like, are you trying to bring the worst guys? Is this a joke?
Oh, God.
They're really trying to like break you.
Yeah, they brought back Tom Holkenborg, who did the music for Godzilla vs. Kong. And I thought he did a very bad job. So they bring back another winner in my eyes.
Well, I just hate that like they were using the theme without using the theme. Like they're just putting like a little twist on it. It's like just use the classic theme.
Because
Come on.
I saw in interviews that guy was trying to say that he thinks, and Adam Wingard was saying this too, that he thinks it's disrespectful to use the music from the Japanese Godzilla movies in American. Well, it's like, no, it's kind of synonymous with Godzilla.
It's his theme.
Yeah, you can't really have it without him, and usually when they don't have the theme, it just feels weird. Like the 2014 one could have definitely benefited from having the theme.
I think they're just being cheap.
How awesome? No, that was one of
They
the.
should have
like,
brought back Bear McCreary.
Yeah, the King of the Monsters absolutely utilized the theme like to the best, especially when his two arrivals when he shows up in the Antarctic to fight Ghidorah. I love that that theme, his classic when he's emerging out of the ice, and then when he shows up in Boston, like yeah, they had the little chanting too, but it was his theme. Like it makes it like when he shows up, like
Yeah, so
get you pumped.
yeah.
I'm just upset that they gave Adam Wingard a sequel. Or maybe Michael Dougherty is busy with something. I would let Michael Dougherty write the story and then direct it, but have someone else write the screenplay. Because he's usually a pretty competent writer, but I don't know what happened with King of the Monsters. I really don't. But that's beside
There could have been another meddling. Was he the only one who wrote it?
Yeah, he wrote the screenplay and story. So it's his script. He co-wrote it with his writing partner, Zach Shields. It's his script. I don't know what happened. He wrote X2. He wrote Superman Returns, Krampus, Trick or Treat. Pretty well-written movies.
We didn't have Bryan Singer helping him.
Well, Bryan Singer didn't write X2.
Just no.
He needs that gentle touch. I'm kidding. But, yeah, Adam Wingard, he just upsets me. I know. I think the last time we talked about Godzilla vs. Kong, we said we were going to do an Adam Wingard special, and I think we should. Because I know he has a very. I think his track record's not very good, surprisingly. I don't know. I feel like now I want to touch upon the points that I made already with Godzilla vs. Kong. But I thought he directed it very poorly, and I'm very upset that I'm going to probably see this opening day, and I'm going to be disappointed like I was 2021.
If you like it, you have to try to Billy Goat him.
No, get out of here. So Craig told me some rumors that maybe, just maybe,
I saw a leak.
I saw a leak, yes. There might be Space Godzilla, and I'm thinking, oh great.
But not really.
Yeah, probably not,
really
honestly.
isn't.
No, like, when we say not really, like, the way they say it's Space Godzilla, I guess that would be, like, the
Space
character
Godzilla,
they've licensed. Yeah.
Well, in that, what was it in that teaser, the title announcement trailer? It was like some ape on the throne.
It's going to be a misdirection, probably. It's probably going to be that's what Kong fights and Space Godzilla fights him or whatever. I'm just thinking, oh no, another villain, another classic Godzilla monster for them to besmirch. Because they ruined Mechagodzilla. They completely whiffed that entirely. And how are they going to ruin another classic monster is my question.
Well, should I tell you what I read in the leak? How they ruined him?
Yeah, tell me. Why not?
So basically, it's not going to be, Space Godzilla as we traditionally saw, where it's like basically like a fusion of Godzilla and other bunch of cells and stuff.
That went to a black hole and came out, but continue.
Yes. It's going to be basically Space Godzilla, but he's made of like flesh, plants, rocks, and crystals. And he gets the Godzilla part of him by finding like dead corpses of Godzilla species and like integrating them or something.
Oh god.
I mean, again, this is just like, I read online like a text dump, but
oh god, I can already picture how he's gonna get his name. That conspiracy theory guy's gonna be like, "Oh man, it looks like Godzilla if he came from outer space. Looks like an alien Godzilla.
No,
that looks like Space Godzilla."
Stop.
Oh.
At least Millie Bobby Brown and G Team from Godzilla vs. Kong are not in this movie. I mean, who knows? Like, there still might be a chance. I don't know.
They're not in it because, it's not his new cast of characters. Like, I mentioned this before, where I hate when, like, new directors come in and, like, they bring in their new cast to replace the old cast because they're toys and they want them in the movie, not the old cast. It irks me. Like, the fact that Kyle Chandler probably won't be in this movie is for the fact that he's the head of Monarch. I know you're probably happy because he's not getting ruined, but I just think it's annoying when directors do this.
Well, they already ruined him in Godzilla vs. Kong, where as soon as he shows up in Godzilla vs. Kong, he already backtracks on his character from King of the Monsters.
Yeah, I know. It's just annoying from, like, a different reason.
Yeah, this is just... Ugh. I'm not a fan. I will go into this movie with an open mind, but I'm probably going to hate it.
It's just like if you're going into Hollow Earth, right, which is not like a pre-established thing in any of the Godzilla outside the legendary Godzilla. It's not like a pre-established thing with Toho, right? And King of the Monsters, did a it was a nice layup. Like they introduced these different titans, and there's more off screen if you want to go into like the novelization and the comics in between movies. Like, if you're going into Hollow Earth, like, uncharted territory, this is a perfect opportunity for them to introduce new monsters. Like,
I must stop you there. Because it's not about the Hollow Earth. It's about them making rules and then blatantly disregarding those rules in the movie. So nothing makes sense with the Hollow Earth. That's exactly what they did in Godzilla vs. Kong, where they made a whole, like, fuss about how to get down there, where it's like, oh, there's this pressure, and they treat it like it's a wormhole. And then later in the movie, Godzilla just shoots a hole down all the way to the Hollow Earth, and that's how they get out.
Which still doesn't make any sense.
It makes no sense at all. And they ruin that. The technological jump is absolutely terrible because it's like a Marvel movie now. Like, there's an underground tunnel, and there's those anti-Hollow Earth vehicles. I can only imagine what they're going to pull out for this movie. Like, oh my god.
Yeah. Yeah, because Skull Island and King of the Monsters did a good job setting it up. Like it's more of just an intricate tunnel system that
It's not an ecosystem where there's another sun. Apparently, I don't know.
yeah, it's just a tunnel system for the Titans to move within around the Earth quickly.
Yeah, that's how Godzilla gets around so fast.
Not anymore.
So he's always zipping around. But yeah, I don't know. I have no hopes. I shouldn't say high, no hopes for this.
I have very low expectations, but to continue to make Colin miserable, is there a chance they could do another Godzilla vs. Kong crossover? Do they still have the rights to one more Godzilla movie in the MonsterVerse besides the TV show?
I think
I'm sure
that Toho extended it, but if this does well, yeah, they'll keep going.
Yeah, I was just gonna say if audiences are dumb enough to think this is a good movie, yeah.
If it somehow is good, I'll be surprised. I mean, I think it honestly.
We know it's not going to be good.
Yeah, I think it might be worse than Godzilla vs. Kong.
Ooh, that's a hot take.
I mean, obviously, we have a long way to go. I mean, it's less than a year.
How low
not
can we go?
But I just don't know. I think it somehow might get decent reviews again. I was thinking about this the other day. I don't know. I still don't know how this Godzilla vs. Kong got such great reviews and King of the Monsters didn't. And I was thinking maybe King of the Monsters, it came out in a crowded summer. It came out in 2019. And that was blockbuster after blockbuster after blockbuster. And then of course, there was Endgame, one of the biggest blockbusters of all time. And were people just, miserable from fatigue from those other movies? And don't get me wrong, King of the Monsters is not a perfect film at all. It's poorly written. But it just seemed like the criticisms are inconsistent. Some of the stuff they'll pass for Godzilla vs. Kong, and they crucified King of the Monsters.
It's funny because King of the Monsters, it's almost like the Mario movie in the sense of audience scores were really high, and the critic scores were not favorable.
Yeah.
Which again, what a sad world we live in.
Just has me thinking. I believe they finished King of the Monsters in late 2018. They should have released it January or February 2019. They should not have competed with Game.
With Godzilla vs. Kong, I do wonder, were there any scaling shots on the monsters?
Not really, because the camera was too busy zipping around and doing barrel rolls and moving incredibly fast.
Well, there's not enough time to do establishing shots. You gotta cut down the runtime.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the Japanese Godzilla movie, but definitely not looking forward to this mess.
And the Gamera series.
Yes, do you think this one will be over 2 hours or still under 2 hours?
I'll be surprised if it's over 2 hours. I'd be very surprised.
Yeah, but at least we have the Japanese Godzilla and the Gamera series coming out.
Yes, which we should do an episode about, just Daniel and I, like we did for the other Gamera movies.
Unless, Craig, you want to watch all of them.
I think I'll pass.
So to summarize our points and to put it succinctly, Godzilla 98 is a tragedy in the sense that what a waste of an opportunity. They whiffed entirely, but as a movie, and just judged primarily as a movie, it isn't terrible.
It's okay.
I didn't hate it. Yeah. I have a soft spot for it.
It's an entertaining monster movie that is not a Godzilla movie.
And it is better than Godzilla vs. Kong. I will stand by that. I will fight that to my very last breath.
You will fight Adam Wingard.
I hate Godzilla vs. Kong. I think it's one of the worst Godzilla movies ever. I hate it so much.
That's a lot of hate.
It is.
Yeah.
So without further ado, I've been Colin.
I've been Craig.
Don't you say it, Daniel. I know what you're going to say.
And I've been Daniel.
Oh, I thought you were going to say Adam Wingard. This has been the Unbiased Opinion, where everyone's opinion is biased except ours. Bye.